Discover 8 spine-chilling true trucker horror stories that expose sinister, haunted highways. Sarah's heart raced as she gripped the steering wheel of her 18-wheeler, the night air thick with suspense and sweat. Just weeks ago, she was filing paperwork in a bright office, but here she was, a single mother driving through stark isolation, all for her kids. The glow of her dashboard illuminated her worried expression, while the faded road stretched endlessly like a yawning chasm ready to swallow her whole. Each mile felt like a ghostly echo of others who had traveled these haunted roads before her. As the truck rumbled along the desolate highway, Sarah glanced at a grim road sign that read Dead Man's Curve, Drive with Caution. A chill swept through her. Locals told stories of heavy-footed drifters who vanished, forever caught in the crooked grip of the asphalt. Shaking her head, she pressed on, convincing herself the stories were mere fabrications born out of rural folklore. But as darkness deepened, her resolve wavered. The quiet of the night was deafening. Tires hummed against the cracked road, but then subtle shifts in the shadows raised the hairs on her arms. Graffiti flickered into view. Turn back now and the dead don't rest here scrawled hastily, like warnings from a grave. Panic bubbled in her throat. Was she truly alone? Longing for distraction, Sarah found herself in the unexpected company of Hank, a fellow trucker whose wide grin felt like a mask, hiding too much. "You're in for a ride, sweetheart. Haunting tales are the best kind to live through." He chuckled, the sound grating against her nerves. She attempted light banter, but Hank's gaze lingered a beat too long. There was something unnerving behind that outward warmth, a chill she could not shake. A fleeting figure flickered in her rearview mirror, a ghostly silhouette drifting by. The truck bucked eerily, and the lights sputtered, her stomach dropped. Frantically, she glanced back, nothing was there. Just desolate highway and thick darkness. Heart pounding, she drove on, her instincts screaming for her to be wary of every sound. Then came that moment, a sickening lurch as her engine died, the headlights fading into an awkward twilight, leaving her stranded on the cursed curve. Bile rose in her throat. She searched for a signal on her phone, nothing. The void of helplessness was all-consuming. "Need a hand?" Hank's truck crept up beside her, the shadow of his cab looming like a predator. She faltered, every instinct urging her to decline his offer. His eyes glinted eerily under the dull glow of the street lamp. "I've seen this happen before," he reassured, but something in her gut told her accepting help could be the greatest mistake of her life. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As Hank's presence invaded her space, a thick tension coiled around her like barbed wire. What had prompted his sudden appearance? Was he the knight in shining armor or a wolf in sheep's clothing? Each passing moment tightened the knot in her stomach as she felt the weight of dozens of unseen eyes watching, the road whispering secrets of lives lost to its treacherous hold. What truths lay buried in the haunted expanse of these roads? Would she uncover the webs of deceit if she allowed Hank to assist her? The deeper she drove into the twilight, the clearer it became. Some roads lead to unknown horrors, and as night blanketed the sky, she stood at the perilous crossroads of fate on the edge of Dead Man's Curve. Sarah's instincts screamed at her to refuse Hank's help. The shadows seemed to stretch closer, wrapping around her in a chilling embrace. She could hear the faint rustling of leaves, but it felt like whispers urging her to flee. Yet the reality of her situation pressed down on her, stranded alone on this sinister stretch of road. The engine had failed her, just like her hope of a peaceful drive home. "What kind of help do you need?" Hank's voice cut through the silence, smooth but dripping with something unsettling. His truck idled beside hers, the engine's low growl felt like a heartbeat in the oppressive darkness. "Just need to call for a tow," she mumbled, but panic twisted in her stomach. She clenched her fists, fighting the urge to shout, "Leave me alone." Instead, she maintained a fragile calm. Her fingers danced over the steering wheel as if it were a lifeline. Hank leaned closer to her window, the glow from his headlights casting an eerie pallor over his face. "You really should not be out here alone. Bad things happen, especially at Dead Man's Curve." The last words were a whisper that hung in the air, heavy with unspoken threats. "What do you mean by that?" she asked, trying to inject a defiant edge into her voice, but instead sounding fragile. "There are stories, you know." His grin widened unnaturally. "Ghosts that roam the roads. People who never made it home." The way he spoke sent icy fingers creeping down her spine. A small shudder escaped her lips. She could feel the ghosts he mentioned hovering close, a spectral breath against her skin. Instead of reassurance, his words only deepened her fear, and her heart raced. What kind of man was this who thrived on other people's discomfort? The truck did not budge an inch, but fear began to creep into her mind like a thick fog, blurring her judgment. "Listen, Hank," she started, but the words fell flat as a flicker of movement caught her eye. A figure darted in the distance, just beyond the reach of the cabin's light. It was there and gone before she could even comprehend what she saw. Just a shadow? Or something much worse? Her heart pounded harder now, its rhythm screaming that danger lurked just out of sight. Hank's gaze followed her line of sight, and the grin fell from his face, replaced by an eerie focus. "What was that?" he asked, his voice suddenly fragmented, the mask slipping for a moment. The night seemed to stretch taut with silence. Sarah blinked and shook her head, desperate to clear the growing fear fogging her thoughts. "Nothing," she said, trying to dismiss the creeping terror. "I thought I saw an animal or something. Out here." Hank chuckled, though it was devoid of warmth. "More like a lost soul, I'm afraid. Best get moving." He leaned back against his truck casually, but there was nothing casual in the way his eyes flickered nervously around, as though sensing something amiss. She hesitated, the grip of dread tightening like a vice around her throat. Could she really trust him? Or was the real danger lurking just out of view, waiting for the shadows to claim a new victim? "Please, Hank," she ventured, but the words caught in her throat as a low, otherworldly wail echoed through the cold night air. Panic ignited, and she turned her eyes back to her dark lane. "What was that?" she gasped, fear welling up. Hank's expression sharpened, his eyes turning to slits as he scanned the horizon. That's why you don't stop here." The atmosphere thickened, an invisible pressure suffocating her lungs. What had she driven into? And if she didn't accept his help, what would happen next? Before her mind could grasp the enormity of the situation, the wail burst forth again, raw and agonizing, cutting through the night like a dagger. It was a sound that resonated with despair, a lament that no earthly soul should ever have to hear. Hank's truck shifted, and he glanced back at her, his earlier bravado replaced with palpable fear. "We should go. Now." Just as she scrambled to decide, the silhouette returned, this time larger, and more distinct. Pale and ragged, it hovered near her truck, and Sarah's breath caught. Then, without warning, it vanished, leaving behind only the chill of its presence, a harbinger of doom that sent every alarm bell blaring in her mind. "Get in my truck," Hank commanded, panic spilling into his words, and she felt the world twist ominously around her. She was faced with a terrifying choice. Was trust still an option, or had it already shattered with that wail in the night? As she reached for the door handle, she wondered, would she be escaping one nightmare only to plunge into another? Or was something even worse waiting out of sight? The air crackled with tension as Sarah swung the door open, her heart pounding like a drum. Each thump echoed her anxiety and the weight of uncertainty that enveloped her. Hank's urgent voice broke through her internal chaos as she hesitated. "Get in. We don't have time." He darted all around, his eyes wide and full of a fear Sarah had not seen before. It wasn't just the terror of what lurked in the darkness, it was something deeper, something instinctual screaming to survive, with the specter's chilling presence still fresh in her mind, she knew she had to act. But as she slid into the truck's cab, the smell of sweat and leather didn't reassure her. Hank slammed the door shut, almost as if he feared that even the air outside held something sinister. "Go! Go!" he barked, revving the engine. The truck roared to life, but instead of comfort, it only filled her with more dread. What was coming for them? As they sped away, the landscape blurred into a menacing tapestry of trees and shadows. Sarah's hands pressed against the dashboard, her breath hitching as the memories of the whale echoed in her ears. What was that thing? Why were you so afraid? She couldn't shake the primal need for clarity, something to cling to in the midst of chaos. Hank's expression was a mix of guilt and fear. You shouldn't have been out here. No one should. Dead man's curve, his voice trailed off, eyes darting to the mirrors as if expecting a pursuer. They flew around a bend, the tires squealing against the asphalt. Sarah felt the truck shift under Hank's frantic control. There are legends, stories the locals whisper over campfires. About how the forest claims souls. Don't tell me ghost stories, Sarah cut him off, sharp panic bubbling inside her. I just want to understand what is going on. His footsteps faltered for a moment, and he met her gaze, vulnerability flashing through his eyes. They say the spirits get angry if you drive through here late at night. They come after you if you can't find your way out. As if on cue, the wailing sound rose again, slicing through the thick night air, a soul-piercing lament that both frightened and compelled. It surrounded them, echoing off the trees, growing louder and more desperate. Sarah looked around, the darkness outside her window seeming to pulse with a life of its own. Hank gripped the steering wheel hard. You don't want to know what happens to those who ignore the warnings. They vanish without a trace. His voice dropped to a whisper, almost drowned by the wail of the unseen. And it doesn't matter if they're in a truck or in the forest. It always wants more. Terror twisted around her like a vice, squeezing tight as her fears blurred with dread. Every shadow seemed to shift and elongate, waiting for the chance to claim another victim. What do we do? Do we keep driving? Sarah felt her resolve waver. Keep your eyes on the road, Hank urged, his eyes flickering between the rearview mirror and the path ahead. And don't look back, just don't look back. But the urge to glance behind her was overpowering, fueled by the insatiable need to know what horror chased them. As they veered deeper into the forest, the trees loomed ominously, closing in around them like grasping hands. Sarah's mind raced. What about the car? The tow? Moments ago, it felt trivial, but now it was a different kind of dread. There's no time. If we stop, we might not leave at all. Hank's voice was laced with urgency, but something else flickered in his expression, a glimmer of understanding, perhaps, yet the sound loomed closer now, a chorus of anguished cries merging into a cacophony of despair. Sarah's heart raced as fear twisted like a knife. What if we can't escape? What if the legends are real? Suddenly, the truck hit a bump, sending Sarah soaring in her seat. The world outside spun into chaos as she shot a glance at Hank, whose gaze was now locked on something in the distance. Look! He shouted, pointing wildly. She turned, the world outside racing past her, and froze. In the darkness, a figure appeared, a humanoid shadow, its features obscured, but a feeling of malevolence radiated from it, and then it vanished, leaving only the sound of wailing reverberating around them, echoing through her own bones. What the Sarah gasped, heart racing, as she felt the pull of something sinister at her back, but as they sped forward, the realization dawned on her, they might be racing into a trap more deadly than anything lurking behind. Keep watching the road. The curve is just ahead. Hank urged. What lay ahead? An escape or the end of their fates? Would they find sanctuary on the other side, or plunge deeper into the terror that gripped Dead Man's Curve? As the truck careened onto the curve, time seemed to slow, and Sarah's gut twisted with dread. What awaited them just beyond the bend could change everything or claim them completely. The wailing grew deafening. There was no turning back. Hank leaned forward, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. The headlights pierced the suffocating darkness ahead, illuminating a twisting path that spiraled into terror. The wailing grew, an eerie symphony of sorrow that seemed to seep into every crevice of the truck. "I can't see, I can't see!" Sarah screamed, her heart racing wildly. The trees pressed closer, blurring into a wall of shadow and fear. "Hang on!" Hank shouted, his voice laced with desperation. He yanked the wheel to the left, narrowly avoiding the edge of the road. The truck swerved dangerously, and for a brief instant, Sarah thought they might tip over. "Are we going to make it?" The question slipped past her lips before she could stop it. Her voice quaked, thick with dread. Hank's face was tense. "Just hold on, okay? We're getting out of this." Another bump jolted through the truck. Sarah could feel every bump, every scratch of the tires cutting through the gravel. But through it all, that unholy wail pierced the air, relentless, tightening around them like a noose. Why is it still behind us?" she rasped, barely able to contain the chill crawling up her spine. "Because it wants us," Hank replied, glancing back. A mistake, she thought, heart-sickening. She could see it in his eyes, he knew the legends and the merciless grip of the unseen thing hunting them. "Don't look back." But she couldn't ignore the pull of temptation any longer. She turned her head, her chest tightening as she faced her fear head-on. What she saw sent chills racing down her back. The figure was closer now, stretching out between the trees, its long, grotesque limbs moving unnatural with a swiftness that defied reality. Hollow eyes glinted with malice, and just when she thought she could scream, a grotesque maw split the figure's face, releasing a ghastly shriek that hollowed out her insides. "Ah!" Sarah's scream echoed within the confines of the truck, drowning her voice in a sea of horror. She jerked back, eyes wide and breathing fast. "It's right there, Hank." "I know." He roared back, focusing on the increasingly sharp curve ahead. "We need to go faster." As they wound through the treacherous curve, the headlights flickered, casting fleeting shadows that played tricks with her mind. Was it just the darkness, or were more figures forming at the edge of the forest? It felt like the woods themselves were alive with haunting presence, closing in, ready to spring. Suddenly, a desperate thought struck Sarah like lightning. What about the turnoff? If we can find a way out. Her voice trembled with hope, but Hank's face twisted in agony as he shook his head. "It's no good. Once you enter this part of the forest, there are no exit signs. It's a maze designed to trap you. What are we going to do?" Panic seeped into her words as adrenaline surged. The shadows seemed to converge, and she felt the suffocating weight of dread press down on her chest. "Fight!" Hank yelled back, determination burning in his eyes. "We fight. No matter what happens." With that, he slammed the accelerator, and the truck roared forward with a death-defying speed. Each turn felt more dangerous, the truck slipping perilously close to the edge. The wailing sound crescendoed, as if the forest itself were starting to scream. Sarah felt her heart thundering in time with the furious engine, a mix of fear and an overwhelming desire to escape. "What if this is it, Hank? What if we don't make it out?" As if to answer her, another shadow darted across the road, but this time, a familiar face emerged from the corner of her eye, an old, sunken figure with hollow eyes staring hungrily at them, lost and forever trapped. "Turn!" she screamed. "I can't." Before Hank could finish, the truck spun out, tires squealing, the world tilting, and for a moment, everything was suspended in fear. And then, silence. The wailing stopped. The shadows receded. It felt as if they had driven straight into an abyss, a chilling calm settling in. But deep down in Sarah's gut, she knew this wasn't over. What had they stumbled into? And had her visions of escape only led them deeper into danger? "Get out!" Hank shouted suddenly, pointing ahead. She looked where he was directing, and to her horror, they were riding straight into a clearing filled with a thick mist. "What is that?" She breathed, a new terror unfurling inside her chest. Hank swallowed hard, his face pale. I think we entered its domain. We need to make a choice, and fast. What choice? In that moment, it dawned on her, in a world filled with ghosts and shadows, sometimes the real horror is what you can't see. And when she looked up at the gathering fog, she felt the choking grip of fear tighten around her again. Which way do we go? And with those words, the wailing began to return closer than ever, angry and insistent. Would they find the path to salvation or wander forever lost in misery? The fog thickened, turning the clearing into a ghostly expanse. Sarah's breath fogged in the chill, mingling with the rising panic in her chest. Which way, Hank? We can't stay here. Her voice trembled, barely rising above the rising wail. It felt as if the fog was alive, pressing against her, feeding on her dread. Listen. Hank leaned closer, straining to pick up something over the growing din. Do you hear it? It wasn't just the wailing. There was something else, a whispering sound, like winds weaving between the trees. It called out to them, a soft voice barely discernible. Sarah, the name echoed through the mist, as if reaching out just for her. A knot twisted in her stomach. She glanced back, her heart racing with the fear of what might be behind them. What was that? Just a trick of the mind. Hank insisted, but his voice faltered. He looked just as frightened as she felt. Stay focused. We have to move. They stumbled out of the truck, and the damp earth sucked at their boots, an unsettling feeling underfoot. The wailing morphed into a low, guttural growl that seemed almost to reverberate in their bones, as if the very forest were warning them to leave. Where do we go? Sarah shouted over the din, her desperation edging into panic. I don't know. Hank shot back, scanning the fog-choked trees. We have to find a path out of this. Suddenly, the fog swirled violently at the edge of the clearing, and a figure emerged. A woman, dressed in tattered clothes, crawled through the mist with a haunting calmness. Her hair hung in matted strands, and her eyes were hollow, mouth stretching into a sinister grin. Help me, she whispered, her voice silky yet broken. Don't listen to her. Hank shouted, gripping Sarah's arm. It's a trick. But Sarah stared, paralyzed by the woman's gaze. There was something familiar about her, something that plucked at her memory like a hidden string. Please, I'm lost, the woman said again, and several other figures stepped out of the fog behind her, faces worn, bodies twisted as if they'd been living in the darkness for far too long. Hank pulled Sarah back, but the wailing crescendoed, transforming into a cacophony of despair. We have to move, now. But Sarah found herself stepping forward, drawn by an inexplicable bond. No, wait. I think I know her. She could be the reason we're trapped here. Hank yelled, his voice tremoring with urgency. The figures shifted and wove closer, each whispering her name now, enveloping the air with echoes of her past. A drop of sweat slid down Sarah's temple, and a flicker of recognition sparked in her mind. Get away from her, Sarah. Hank's voice broke through her foggy thoughts. She's part of this, she's luring you in. The moment hung heavily between them, the angry wail swelling again, now mixed with the mournful cries of the gathered souls. Sarah's instincts screamed at her to run, but deep within, she felt the cold fingers of recognition tightening around her heart. What if they can help us? She ventured, before realizing how fragile her pleas sounded. Help us? Hank stared, eyes wide with disbelief. Look at them. They can't, but just then, the woman's grin faded, leaving her expression hollow and dark. Help comes at a cost, she whispered. The mist thickened, choking the light, wrapping around them like a shroud. As the figures edged closer, Hank's grip on Sarah tightened, fear and defiance racing through him. No more choices. We're leaving. He pulled Sarah back, but her feet felt rooted in place. And that's when the fog began to swirl violently again, voices rising into a feral roar. Join us in an instant. Sarah felt herself slipping, teetering on the edge of a decision that could either lead to salvation or plunge her deeper into darkness. "Do you trust me?" Hank's eyes were fierce, reflecting the same horror she felt. I don't know." Before she could think, Hank lunged, forcing her to run with him into the unknown, but as they bolted, the cries intensified, desperate and frenzied, reaching for them with icy hands. Behind them, the woman's voice rang clear through the chaos, "You can't escape the truth." And then, everything erupted into silence, darkness swallowed them, and the world faded into a hushed breath laden with uncertainty. "What now?" Sarah gasped, struggling to keep the tremor from her voice, the fog closing in on them again. "I don't know," Hank whispered, glancing fearfully over his shoulder. "But whatever the truth is, it's waiting for us." What truth lurked within the fog? Would they discover it, or fall victim to the horrors that lay ahead? The fog pressed in like a vice, squeezing any hope from Sarah's chest. She strained to see Hank beside her, his silhouette blurred and ghostly. "What if it comes back?" she whispered, her voice quivering. "It won't," he assured her, though uncertainty flickered in his eyes. "Just keep moving." They stumbled forward, feet slipping in the muddy ground, the wailing now replaced by an eerie silence. It felt wrong. The quiet screamed louder than the cacophony from moments before, threatening to crack the fragile walls of their sanity. Then, a chilling wind cut through, carrying with it faint echoes of their past, fragments of memories that flickered like candle flames in the suffocating dark. Sarah, she froze, the sound ricocheting inside her mind, a voice she hadn't heard in years. "No," she gasped, instinctively recoiling as images of lost moments resurfaced, laughter, love, and then an abyss of despair. "Keep going," Hank urged, pulling her shoulder to break the spell that had ensnared her. Yet, as they ran, she caught sight of something moving in the mist ahead, a shadow that seemed to pulse and writhe, drawing closer. Panic surged. "Hank, I see it," he shouted, terror bleeding into every syllable. "This way." They veered sharply, skirting the edge of a deep trench. Just beyond the trench lay a cluster of gnarled trees, twisted and barren, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The wind carried a whisper, barely decipherable, but it still sent chills racing down Sarah's spine. "Help us know." Hank gritted his teeth, urging her forward while the shadows loomed, growing more solid with every breath. "We have to break through. Don't stop." But the shadows morphed again, shifting into recognizable faces, the woman from before accompanied by others, now more defined, their hollow eyes wide with longing and pain. "You're one of us now." Each step felt heavier, as if gravity itself conspired to keep them in place. Sarah's heart raced, but oddly, beneath the weight of fear came a strange heat, as if something within her fought against the unknown, awakened by that plea. "Hank, it feels like they want something," she gasped, desperation tightening its grip. "What if they can show us the way?" "Are you insane?" he snapped, teeth clenched. "They want to drag us down. We can't trust them." Shadows swirled again, and the woman's grin returned wider this time, teeth glinting like knives. "The truth is in the darkness, Sarah. Embrace it." A shudder rippled through her. "I can't." But her feet hesitated, caught between the pull of the shadows and Hank's frantic pulls. "Run!" he shouted again, and this time his voice broke through her haze. Spurred by adrenaline, Sarah stumbled backward, yanking Hank to lead the way, all while feeling the eyes of the shadows bore into her with fierce intensity. The fog surged around them, thickening into a wall. With every stride, Sarah felt whispers claw at her mind, desperate promises of release and understanding. "Hank, I..." Suddenly, a loud crack exploded from the direction of the clearing, like thunder from a storm. The ground shook, as if something ancient was awakening beneath them. The shadows shrieked, their harmony of voices rising into chaos. "Join us." Without thinking, she grabbed Hank's hand tighter. "This way." She spotted a narrow beam of light piercing through the fog at the edge of the clearing, a beacon against the encroaching darkness. "Trust me," she urged, dashing toward it. They barreled ahead, hearts hammering, the figures closing in, their wails desperate and filled with need. The light grew brighter, but the chill in the air intensified, sharpening the silence until it felt like a knife pressed against her skin. Just as they neared the beam, a wall of fog crashed over them again. Sarah gasped as everything went black, the world slipping from her grasp. They landed hard, tumbling into an open space, breathless and shaken. But they weren't alone. Surrounding them were the figures, their eyes now sharper, glimmering with a hunger that was palpable. "What do you want?" Hank shouted, confusion and fear twisting his voice. A chorus of voices answered, each word slow and dripping with darkness. "To show you what lies ahead." And then, without warning, the fog spiraled into an opening, revealing a path lined with grotesque visions of their past, illuminated by the flickering light of long-buried memories. "Don't look back," Sarah pleaded. But the shadows pressed in closer, a nasty grin on each face. As they began to step forward, the wailing returned, now ominous and mocking. "Will you join us?" The path before them twisted endlessly, and Sarah felt herself drawn into its call. She gripped Hank's hand, fear igniting a fight within her. "Can we escape this together, or is it already too late?" Ahead, the shadows whispered, alive with unknown intentions, waiting for them to make their fateful choice. Would they choose to leap into the abyss, or find a way to unravel the threads of their past? In that moment of uncertainty, the fog thickened, once more reducing their world to a suffocating black, leaving the looming answer just out of reach. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as the walls of fog swirled, dimming the thin light that had once offered them hope. The figures loomed larger, their eyes sparkling with malevolence that threatened to swallow them whole. "Take our hand." The chorus echoed through the hollow air, a dangerous melody that beckoned to her very essence. "No." Hank pulled her tighter against him, his grip a lifeline. "We don't know what they want." The shadowy forms shifted, faces twisting in anguish, and for a brief moment, Sarah felt a tingle in her chest, a recognition of something long forgotten. "Hank," she croaked, "they were like us once. What if they're trapped?" "Trapped or not, it's a trick." He spat back, breathing heavily. "We can't." The echoes of their laughter twisted with the shadows, drowning out Hank's voice. "Join us. Don't you remember?" The whisper turned to a shrill scream, vibrating through the air. "We all belong to the dark." Sarah clenched her teeth. "We have to fight it. I can feel something calling to me." "Don't listen," Hank cried, desperation in his voice. "We need to push through." He tore them away from the swirling mass, but the ground beneath them trembled violently. A sharp crack echoed like a whip, and they both stumbled. The fog surged again, wrapping around their legs like icy tendrils. "Look!" Sarah gasped, pointing to the path ahead, a flickering light filled with panting breaths and muffled screams. "It's there." They rushed forward, the light pulsing with an almost sentient rhythm. In a heartbeat, they reached the threshold, the warmth licking at their skin, a cruel promise of salvation. But the shadows surged after them, hungry for their light. "Please!" One of the figures cried out, a pale woman with empty eyes. "Help us! We can't escape." "Don't believe them, Sarah," Hank yelled, voice rising above the chaos. "They're trying to trap us." The warmth flickered, the light dimming with every step they took. The shadows drew closer, faces morphing into grotesque smiles, a dozen mouths forming one terrible word: "Stay no." Sarah shouted, throwing her arms wide as if to ward off the encroaching darkness. The remnants of her past clawed at her psyche, forcing memories to the surface: her son's laughter, the Christmas she thought would never end, and the whispers of promises made before the despair. The light flickered again, this time revealing dark silhouettes were not mere shadows but tightly wound memories taking form. "You don't want to forget us." "I have to move on," Sarah screamed, feeling tears stream down her cheeks. "I can't stay in this darkness." Suddenly, the ground quaked beneath their feet, swallowing the path to light. The figures lunged, extending hands that twisted and curled like serpents' tails. Hank's nails dug into Sarah's arm, pulling her back. Run! They turned, making a break for it, dodging grasping hands and tempered whispers that veered towards madness. The fog roared in response, slamming down a wall of cold air, swallowing the path as it collapsed behind them. Eyes darting, they skidded to a halt at the edge of a cliff. Below lay an abyss, swirling shadows beckoning, flickering with an irresistible promise. The churning, hungry void trembled, whispering, "Join us, Hank." Sarah shouted over the rising wind, heart racing. "We can't go back now. We have to jump." "Are you crazy?" he cried, staring into the depths below. "Do you know what lies in that darkness? Something worse is coming for us." The fog receded momentarily, revealing the faces of lost souls, pleading with outstretched hands. In the distance, a deeper shadow lurked, something more sinister than they could imagine, its intent clear. Suddenly, the figures lunged them back, a cascade of hope falling away. "You cannot escape your past." With no time to hesitate, Sarah clenched Hank's hand tighter, adrenaline surging through her veins. Together. And with that, they leapt into the unknown, the shadows closing around them like a hungry beast, the echoes of their past trailing in their wake. As they plummeted into the void, a chilling realization struck the warmth of the light. Faded completely, leaving them swallowed by the darkest abyss. Did we make the wrong choice? Hank's voice trembled, panic spilling into the cold air. But before Sarah could respond, an unearthly roar echoed from below, reverberating through her bones. "Sarah, you're finally home!" Before she could scream, a blinding white light erupted around them, and Sarah felt her consciousness splintering at the seams. What awaited them in this eternal fall? Reunification or torment? As they spiraled deeper into the unknown, she could only pray for answers, knowing the real horror may be yet to come. The moment they landed, the ground was cold and hard beneath them. Sarah gasped, her breath steaming in the icy air. But there was no time to catch her breath. Shadows writhed around them, whispering in the softest of voices, luring them deeper into the darkness. "Where are we?" Hank's voice was barely above a whisper, panic tightening his throat. Standing beside her, his eyes flickered with uncertainty, darting back and forth as if he could spot their escape. "I don't know," Sarah murmured, fingers trembling at her sides. The darkness pulsed, breathing like a living thing, heavy with the weight of countless souls trapped within. Ahead, a dim light flickered, swaying as if caught in a gentle breeze. Outlined against blackness, it was a tiny beacon of hope. "Let us go!" Sarah shouted, racing forward. The furtive whispers morphed into laughter, echoing in her ears as they inched closer to the light, but as they approached, the light twisted and warped, revealing a figure stood amidst it, a woman whose visage was obscured by a mass of tangled hair. Hollow eyes stared at them, too wide, too vacant, as if she could see the very marrow of their souls. "Welcome!" Her voice glided like silk, a venomous sweetness that lodged itself in Sarah's ears. "You've been searching for truth. What will you sacrifice to find it?" Hank moved protectively in front of Sarah. "We're not sacrificing anything," he snapped. "Just tell us how to get out of here." The woman chuckled softly, the sound resonating like chimes in a windless night. "Out? Such a funny notion," she replied. "You're already home, dear ones. You carry your home with you." "Home?" Sarah spat back, her heart racing. "This isn't home. This is a nightmare." The shadows around them suddenly thickened like a fog rolling in on a quiet lake, closing in tighter. The whispers grew louder, overwhelming stories of unfulfilled lives, lost love, and forever regrets. They clawed at her insides, dredging up memories long buried. "Remember?" the voices coaxed. "Remember what you left behind?" Images flooded her mind, a toddler's laughter transforming into cries, family gatherings filled with tension, a shattered vase that had marked her dissolution. A sharp pain shot through her, and she stumbled back, eyes darting to Hank, whose face mirrored her dawning horror. "No. We can't!" he shouted, shaking his head as if to brush away the memories. "We're not falling for this." But the woman stepped closer, her smile widening, unhinging like a trap. "But you already have. You're tied to us, to your past. The deeper you venture, the deeper you sink. You can't escape what was what is." Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled again, cracking and splintering beneath their feet. Sarah's scream caught in her throat as she grabbed Hank's arm. They were losing footing, the abyss swirling eager to claim them. "Run!" she shouted, and they bolted away from the woman, the chilling laughter echoing behind them, booming, relentless. Hank tugged her, racing toward an ever-dimming light in the distance, a promise of safety. Or another trap. As they surged forward, the ground erupted around them, gnarled roots and grasping hands reaching from below, pulling, dragging. Sarah could feel herself being jerked back, the darkness clawing at her limbs, hot and cold simultaneously. "Don't let go!" Hank shouted, his voice nearly drowned out by the chaos surrounding them. "We're almost there." Then, to her horror, Sarah glanced behind her, catching a glimpse of 1,000 faces. They were twisted in agony, stretching out in a slow-motion scream, their fingers curling like frozen memories. She could feel their pain, their despair netting her with sticky sorrow. "Please! You belong to us!" the woman shouted, her voice seeping into Sarah's bones. "We only seek to reunite you with everything you desire." "No!" Sarah cried back, the words fueled by desperation. "I want to live. I want to forget." But before they could reach the flickering light, a surge of shadows blocked their path. Tossed back, they tumbled to the ground, hearts pounding as panic circled like vultures overhead. The dark crescendo grew deafening, drowning out Sarah's thoughts. "Hank!" she yelled, fear clenching her gut. "What do we do?" The ground beneath them cracked again, wider this time, as if the void itself was swallowing their hope. "Stop fighting it!" the shadowy figures roared, urgency foaming in their cries. "Come back to the darkness." With a heart-stopping thud, Sarah and Hank hit the ground. Blood rushed through her veins, but then a new sound erupted from below, a low growl, heavy and predatory. "Sarah, it's time to embrace the truth." She looked at Hank, and fear ignited in her chest. The truth? What lay beneath their feet that they didn't know? And with that thought chilling her bones, the ground surged again. The laugh echoed once more, ripping through the air and plunging them further into darkness, leaving Sarah wondering if answers or horrors awaited them on the other side. What if this was not the end but just the beginning of something far worse? The earth shook, a deep rumble that rose from underfoot like a beast awakening from slumber. Sarah's heart raced as she clutched Hank's hand tighter. "We can't stay here," she screamed, her voice nearly lost beneath the cacophony of despair and chaos. With a fierce determination, they scrambled to their feet, pulling away from the gnawing fingers of darkness that tried to wrap around their ankles. The woman's voice lingered in the air, a siren's call laced with malice. "What you seek lies within. Shut up!" Hank yelled, his face twisted with anger and fear. "We'll find a way out." But time wasn't on their side. Behind them, the abyss was gaping wider, an insatiable maw eager to consume everything in its path. They edged forward, every pulse of the ground sending jolts of terror through their bodies, shivering through them like electric shocks. They stumbled toward an expanse of the lighter gloom ahead, where shadows fought against the weak glow. Sarah could feel the darkness nipping at her heels, a whispering horde beckoning her to turn around, to succumb, to surrender. "Just a step back, just a moment," it sang, tempting her with wicked promises. "No!" she shouted back, as if defying the very fabric of the night. "I want to let you take me. Keep moving," Hank urged, his voice cutting through her wavering resolve. But the soft laughter grew louder, an echo bouncing off unseen walls, wrapping around them, feeding on their fears. It was a nightmarish melody, a cruel parody of life. They pressed onward, sweat trickling down Sarah's back, heart hammering relentlessly in her chest. Whatever waited in that light, she had to believe it was better than the horrors clawing to pull them into the depths. Each step was a battle, each breath heavy with dread as the air grew thick, suffocating. Shadows twisted, forming grotesque shapes that loomed closer, gnashing invisible teeth, their whispers now a cacophony demanding to be heard. Don't you want to remember? Don't you want to belong? No. Hank shouted, swinging his arm to swipe away the palpable darkness. But every swipe seemed to draw them in closer, thickening the very air they breathed. Focus on the light. He urged, but the brilliance flickered, stuttering like a dying flame. As they neared the edges of the glow, the figure of the woman emerged once more, now more defined, a mockery of grace with death dripping from her every word. You can't escape your truth. It will always find you. Fear trembled within Sarah and Hank like an electric current. We won't believe you. Hank roared defiantly, but shadows danced, lapping at his resolve. A tingling sensation coursed through Sarah as the light grew demanding, drawing her closer yet threatening to vanish. Is this it? She thought frantically. Is this the escape we seek or another illusion? Suddenly, the earth beneath them began to shatter again, the ground like glass cracking in all directions, splintering the air with a haunting sound. Run! She yelled, and they took off just as another surge of darkness erupted beneath them, a vortex spiraling wildly into chaos. The light beckoned like a whispered promise, inviting them closer but still obscured in mystery. Yet, a distant howl, primal and guttural, echoed from deep within the chasm, slicing through the air like a warning. Sarah! Hank screamed, as he lost his footing, falling painfully as the earth yanked at him with manic desperation. She turned just in time to see him slipping away, everything shifting, as if the world around them was splintering into pieces. No! She reached for him, diving back toward the darkness. But another dark hand reached out, snagging her wrist with unyielding force. The grinning woman loomed larger, mouth a gaping chasm of shadows and laughter, eyes glinting with malicious intent. Let him go! Sarah howled, the weight of panic pulling her deeper into despair, every heartbeat echoing against the walls of their prison. And then the laughter ceased, an eerie quiet settling over everything as a single phrase rang out, darkly joyful, does anyone want to join him? As Hank's frightened eyes locked onto hers, everything spiraled out of control. What choice would Sarah make as darkness wrapped around her like a lover's embrace? And would the truth she sought be worth the price they would pay? The darkness throbbed, alive with an unsettling pulse that reverberated through Sarah's bones. Panic surged, drowning out reason as she fought against the hands of shadows pulling relentlessly at her. Hank! She screamed, desperation clawing at her throat. The abyss was gaping wide, ready to swallow everything they'd ever known. She leapt toward him, fingers outstretched, heart hammering wildly. Grab my hand! But before she could reach him, the ground trembled violently. The dark hand around her wrist tightened, its grip unyielding. You can't save him. The woman hissed, eyes gleaming with twisted delight. That voice, silky yet venomous, echoed in Sarah's mind. Let him go, she urged with more strength than she believed she had left. The uncertainty of their fate hung thick in the air. What do we do? Hank's face was pale, the reality of their situation dawning like a cold wave crashing over him. Fight it! He yelled back through gritted teeth, struggling against the forces trying to tear them apart. Don't let go. But the shadows, they're pulling us in. Then we pull back. In that moment, clarity pierced through the fog of despair. She focused on the light flickering but still there, a promise of salvation. Hank, hold on. With a surge of adrenaline coursing through her, she yanked free from the shadow's grip, and as she tore away, she felt the darkness scream in fury. Hank lunged for her, and they collided, clasping hands tightly, almost reverently. Together. Sarah shouted, fueled by rage and fear. We can't let them take us. And with that, they turned to face the encroaching shadows. With every step back toward the light, the shadows howled, rising behind them in a tumultuous wave. You cannot escape. They shrieked, voices melding into a dreadful symphony of despair. Keep your eyes on the light, Hank urged, his presence grounding her even as their hearts raced in synchrony. The distance to the light felt like miles, with the dark horde surging against their resolve. As they barreled forward, the ground shook violently, trees creaking and groaning in protest, yet they pressed on. I want to let go, Sarah gasped, her voice rising above the din. The light pulsed invitingly, closer yet not within reach, dancing like a flickering flame in the night. The woman surged ahead, eyes gleaming maliciously. They will abandon you, she cried out, a sinister rhythm to her allure. You know they cannot offer you what you truly seek. No, Hank shouted back defiantly, and he pulled Sarah closer, desperation igniting his voice. We live for the hope of a brighter tomorrow. The ground trembled, fissures cracking open, but they pushed through the darkness, a forceful step following another, panic fueling their determination. The shadows behind roared, furious at their defiance. Then, just when they thought the weight of the world would crush them, a surge of power coursed through their joined hands. Don't look back, Hank gasped in a fierce whisper, a steely resolve shining in his eyes. Focus on what we want. Together, she echoed, pouring everything into those words. The light flickered, but it grew stronger, illuminating their path with rays of hope. Just a few more steps in one fluid motion, they barreled toward the brightness, gripping each other's hands tighter, hearts racing faster. The whispers of shadows swirled around them, shrieking relentless taunts, yet they focused on the warmth of the light, a certain shield against the encroaching void. When they finally crashed through the last barrier between them and salvation, the light consumed them entirely, yet in that blinding embrace, reality shifted, shadows dissipated, consumed by a radiant glow. Sarah and Hank were swept in a torrent of warmth, memories flooding their minds, lost time, bonds rebuilt, love woven with resilience. The past shimmered but did not restrain. Did we? Sarah's voice trembled as clarity returned. They stood hand in hand, safely standing in a world washed with serenity. Hank turned to her, eyes shining with clarity. We did it. We're free. They stood on a new road, the sun shining brightly, its warmth wrapping around them like a long-lost embrace. There were no eerie shadows lurking, just the hum of life and a promise of a new beginning. I'm sorry we lost each other before, she whispered, feeling fresh strands of hope weave into their connection. But we made it through. Together, Hank echoed, and they both smiled. As the horizon stretched invitingly ahead, Sarah realized they had conquered not just the shadows outside, but the darkness within. They shared a knowing glance, a shared understanding of the harrowing path they traversed and the wisdom gained. She squeezed his hand, feeling the weight of possibility resting in their palms. Let us go home, she said, and they stepped into the sunlight, ready for a future unmarred by the pain of the past. Now that you've journeyed with Sarah and Hank through shadows to the light, it's your turn. Hit that subscribe button immediately so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. You need to subscribe now and smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Share your reactions and theories about the ending in the comments, we want to hear from you. Don't wait even one more second to share this story with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support.